For everyone who lives in western Pennsylvania, many grew up listening to a story of a faceless man who roams at the highway or at the local tunnel at the dead of the night. Many people had different stories regarding the man. Some believed that he had a severely disfigured face and glowing greenish skin because he was once struck by lightning when he was little, which caused him to lose both of his eyes, his nose, and his right arm. Whilst others believed that he fell onto a vat of acid as he was once a worker in a local factory, which explains why his skin was green. Others claimed that he wasn't a human to begin with, that he was a specter doomed to stalk desolate western Pennsylvania highways for all eternity. In the mid-2000s, Maya Renchet, who was in high school at that time, decided to spend her Saturday night roaming around the highway to find the Green Man with his boyfriend. Elwood City is not exactly known for its nightlife, so going for a hunt just to get a glimpse of the man for a cheap thrill is the only way Maya Renchet knew how to kill her boredom. Everyone grew up hearing about the Green Man, but it's one of those things where you don't really think you're going to see anything, Renchet said. It's a ghost story, something your parents talk about around a fire pit. But we still did it, and it was still scary, even though we knew it wasn't real. People have been looking for the Green Man for almost 100 years. If you had the guts, you went out and tried to find him. The Green Man, or Charlie No Face, as the locals call him, is actually real. Today, we will uncover the true story of Raymond Robinson. In March 2007, The Times published a comprehensive story on Ray Robinson, known by many as the Green Man. The article was about a horrific accident about an 8-year-old boy who was electrocuted in 1918 in Beaver Falls. Ray Robinson was walking with his sister and a few friends in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, when they noticed a bird's nest perched atop a tree next to an abandoned trolley trestle. Wanting to get a closer look, Ray climbed up, but accidentally touched a wire that had once powered the trolley. Although the trolley has been abandoned, it still had power flowing through it. In an instant, Ray was electrocuted. All of his facial features, including his right arm, were destroyed and melted due to the intense power of the voltage. Ray was not the only one who fell into victim of being electrocuted by the wire. Almost a year earlier, another boy who had touched the same wire died after being admitted to the hospital for 2 painful weeks. Even though his injuries were severe, many had thought he would succumb to the same fate as the boy did, but somehow he managed to recover from it. Doctors, relatives, and friends alike thought it was a miracle that he could survive from such a gruesome accident. However, his life was never the same after it. In 2008, there were plans on shooting a documentary based on the urban legend of the Green Man titled Route 351 by a filmmaker, Tisha York. She had spent 3 years researching and interviewing people who knew Ray Robinson personally. The documentary was initially scheduled to be released in 2009, but the shooting was delayed due to the Great Recession and is on hold as of 2020. According to York, the Green Man moniker came not from the rumors about him working at a factory, but from something a little more gruesome. His nose was basically an open wound his entire life. It would get infected quite often, and that would make it turn green. As to why he is called Charlie No Face instead of Ray No Face remains a mystery. Being isolated and ostracized is a common thing for Ray. He was even treated this way by his own family, who would eat separately from him. If you look at old Victorian homes, so many of them have isolated rooms with drains and plumbing and everything you need to live right there. Back then, this is where families kept children like Ray. things were different, and they kept people who were different hidden away from the world. Although this was the case, Ray tried to make the best of it. Just like many people, Ray was an avid baseball fan. He listened to every game he could pick up on his radio. He learned to read Braille and how to make wallets and doormats out of old tires. When he became an adult, he lived at his family's garage, where his family fashioned for him as a small apartment. He lived in isolation throughout his life, only until at one point, he was craving for a connection to the outside world. Ray developed a reputation for walking around Route 351 and neighboring roads in Beaver County at night, said York, who also grew up in Elwood City. Obviously, the way he looked garnered some attention. Rumors spread, people started to actually seek him out, and for many, he embraced that. He loved to smoke, he loved to drink beer. These late-night encounters became one of his main connections to the outside world. The following is the story from the article by Daniel Fishel from The Thrillist about his dad's first-hand encounter of the Green Man himself. In the late night of 1960s, when my dad was 13, he claimed he had met Charlie No Face. He still says it was the most terrifying moment of his life. My dad and his friends had been night swimming at the local pool, and they stumbled upon the topic of the Green Man. At this point, everybody in town had heard about his story. But what's different on that night for my dad was one of his older friends who claimed he had met the man in person himself. On that very night, they went and searched for him, carrying a case of beer, a straw, and some cigarettes. My dad was not sure exactly what to expect. He had to see him in person in order to believe him. When they eventually found Ray walking alone on the side of the highway, they pulled the station wagon up next to him. The driver, who said he had met Ray before, hopped out as my dad and the others in the car watched through the fog. When Ray climbed into the car, my dad was not prepared to see his blank face. To make it even worse, his face was glowing off of the dashboard lights, and he couldn't help himself but scream out of fear. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. After a few moments, my dad managed to calm himself down. Picture the subject of one of the most notorious urban legends of your generation, sitting beside you in the back seat of a station wagon, casually sipping a domestic light beer through a bendy straw. My dad gradually realized he had nothing to fear. It was like meeting the boogeyman and discovering he's just like any ordinary guy. As anyone who has gone through life being different knows that the world can be a cruel place. For Ray, not all who tracked him down had the same intention of sharing a beer with him, taking a picture, and moving on. People would beat him up. They would urinate into beer bottles, then give it to him, so he never drank an open drink. Sometimes, people would pick him up, drive him to the middle of nowhere, and toss him out of the car. People were just so cruel to him, and he never understood why, York said. Just the mere sound of an oncoming vehicle is enough to make him feel restless. Rumor had it that at one point, Ray had to carry a gun just for safety. People need to understand this was a human being, a real person, and someone who endured one of the most tragic lives I've ever encountered, said York. Underneath it all was this beautiful, kind man. Recently, I pulled up photos of Ray online and showed them to my dad. He didn't say anything for a while. He just looked and remembered. The only thing he could say is that he was sorry he was ever scared of the man in the first place. I interviewed hundreds of people about Ray all over Western Pennsylvania, said York. They were mostly young men like your father who would go out with Ray or pick him up and drive him around. And I wouldn't be able to count how many of these grown men broke down in tears talking about him. A lot of them regretted the way they treated him, understandably. But so many people just cried, remembering what Ray meant to them and what he did for them. or just reflecting on his life and how sad and bittersweet it actually was. There's a photo of him posing with a woman, maybe the only woman other than members of his family he ever touched. You could tell he was happy and that she wasn't scared. There was the young man who lost a brother in Vietnam, who credits Ray's companionship and unending empathy as a major force of positivity during his grieving period. He taught countless people who would spend long nights sitting in a car or on a porch with him about the virtue of looking past the superficial, of swallowing fear and abandoning preconceptions. He showed so many people that it was okay to be different. He actually changed lives. And through it all, Ray was never angry. He was never upset. He never asked, "Why me?" He kept being positive, being genuine, and being the kind of person and friend we all wish we could be, York said. Everyone will remember the legends, but he meant so much more to so many people, and it really made him happy. That's the thing about urban legends. Most of them are grounded in some truth, more often than not, in tragedy. Ray Robinson had a face that was unforgettable. He had a reputation that kept children up at night and continues to do so. They still talk about him in Beaver County. They talk about him all over the world. No one can keep him hidden anymore. He died in 1981 in a nursing home. He's buried in Beaver County, just a few feet away from the little boy who was electrocuted 1 year before him. Occasionally, you will see fresh flowers placed on his grave. He was a gleaming example of someone being given the worst and making the best of it. What do you think of today's topic? Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you'll get notified as soon as there's a new episode. Stay safe and have a great day.